All right, it's October 31st, 2014. This is the news conference regarding the Texas State Fire Marshal's report on the May 31st, 2013 Southwest End fire. At this time, I introduce Fire Chief Terry Garrison.
Thank you, Brewery. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming here today. I'm going to read off these notes here on the front end of this before we get into the actual questions. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
So, we apologize for making this kind of a late press conference for you. We spent the morning with the family. They received the report today. They each got a copy of a bound report from the State Fire Marshal's office, and we haven't had a chance, and obviously we can't copy the bound report, but the family members each received one copy. So the Texas State Fire Marshal's office completed its investigation into our May 31st, 2013 incident at the Southwest End where we lost our 4 members. Before I begin, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the process. The State Fire Marshal's office investigate every fallen firefighter in the state. That's part of their responsibility, and they complete these reports by October 31st of the following year. They've had an extremely busy year this year in the state of Texas. We've actually lost 19 firefighters in the state of Texas this year. It's been a pretty tragic year. Across the country, the American Fire Service loses, unfortunately, about 100 firefighters per year, and we were on track for that same amount in 2013. The investigation itself has identified 8 primary areas, or eight findings. I'm going to share those findings with you in a second. But I think what's important to note is that the report itself has identified some things that we had already identified in our recovery process, that there was an early collapse of the roof structure, which caused the loss of our members, our 4 members, and then it also injured several other members. What they found that also matched up with the internal investigation we did is that there was no risk management or decision-making negative, excuse me, let me say this a different way. They didn't identify any negative, or the fact that we were wrong in our decision-making or our risk management. And it's important, I want to say that right up front, because it's really important to note that in the American Fire Service, we obviously study firefighter deaths. And one of the primary, or 2 of the primary causes of firefighter death in just about every fatality is a poor risk management. That means being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and poor incident command. What's missing from the report is that these weren't their findings. So that's actually something that we're glad to hear. We've said since the beginning, early on, that we felt like our members were in the right place, doing the right thing at the right time, and we kind of came to that conclusion internally, and that was actually found to be true based on the state report. Now the state does their report, but nothing in their ordinance doesn't allow us to do our own investigation. So we started the recovery process with the primary responsibility and primary concerns. We wanted to start learning from this incident. We're going to take the state report, and we're going to continue to use that as we move forward and learn from this incident. I'm going to tell you that there was 8 findings, and I'll tell you in a minute where you can get a copy of that report. But there's 8 findings, and the findings didn't surprise us at all. It matched up pretty much with our recovery document. That's okay. So I took the findings and I prioritized them, or categorized them. And finding number 1 is a finding that something that they've identified that we could have done prior to the incident, and that is that there was no pre-fire planning done on the structure. So what the recommendation and what we do in the American Fire Service is we try to get into every structure, and we try to learn as much as we can about this structure by doing a pre-fire planning. That is, get into the structure prior to actually having a fire. That was finding number 1. We did not do that with the Southwest End fire. There was no official pre-fire plans drawn up. Finding number 2 had to do with the arrival. Our finding number 2 states that the initial entry crews did not perform a 360-degree size up. And what that is in the American Fire Service is we enter these high-risk, low-frequency hazard zones. We want to find out as much information as we can about that hazard zone. So we try to do a 360. Obviously, with the Southwest End fire, you all are there. You helped us through this process, and you actually know that it would have been very difficult to get all the way around that structure prior to entering it. So we understand that, but that's finding number 2. And then there was 3 findings that were stated that kind of identified things, that areas that we should have and could have done prior to re-entry. So we entered the fire, we exited because of water reasons. We knew that we did that in a calculated and managed sort of way, and then we entered again. So there was 2 findings on that. One of them was that we may have not have known of the severity of the fire conditions above us and the impact it had on the roof structure, which could or could not be true. Finding number 4 was that there was not a lot of communication that took place between the original IC, or between the IC and the interior crews about the conditions from the outside. And we'll learn from that. And communication is another one of those factors that you hear a lot when we lose firefighters. As you hear the incident command piece, the risk management piece, and the communication seems to be an ongoing issue in the American Fire Service. So when I look at this fire, as we've examined it over the last 17 months, we feel like there was honestly 2 separate phases to this one fire. Phase 1 is the dispatch until the collapse. We consider that phase 1. I just gave you the 4 recommendations of phase 1. Phase 2 is actually from the collapse to getting our last member out. So you can think about phase 1 was one of the most horrific days we've had in the American Fire Service and in Houston. Phase 2 was probably one of the most heroic days we've ever had in the American Fire Service, and especially the city of Houston. And the reason why is because we made a calculated decision, our members did, to stay there and rescue our members, knowing that there was a possible imminent second collapse of a wall. So when we did that, we were successful. We actually brought out Captain Bill Dowling, you all know him now as Iron Bill. We brought him out of the structure. Captain Iron Bill is the first recorded, and this is important, Captain Bill is the first recorded rescue of a firefighter who's been inside a structure using the technology that we have now, which is the RIT system. Rather than tell you a lot about that, is we use air from another person's bottle to provide to Captain Dowling, and then we were able to get him out of the structure. That's the first time in the history of the country, according to NIOSH, that has ever occurred. So the last 4 recommendations are findings from the state regard to post-collapse. And I'll just read them to you. Finding number 5, they felt like there was a lack of accountability after the collapse. And that's understandable because we were trying to identify where our members were. We had a lot of members rush to the scene. And accountability pretty much means that we know the position and function of every firefighter on the hazard zone. We were moving a lot on that hazard zone. Finding number 6 was the radio communications were difficult, if not impossible. We also believe that that's a correct finding in the fact that when we have a collapse, and this is noted in the American Fire Services, when there is a mayday, a lot of communications takes place. That doesn't necessarily mean that the incident commander wasn't in control of communications. It just means that there was a lot of issues with communication as far as getting messages back and forth. Just a follow-up to that is most of the communication that was taking place in the rescue area was face-to-face communication, and Chief Mann was actually there and was a part of that rescue and recovery operation. Finding number 7 was an accountability report right after the Mayday. The state and most of the fire service would like us to get an accountability report. That is, where is everybody? Go on the radio and find out exactly where everybody is. But as you guys look at the report online today, you'll notice that there is a lot of work being done, and really to tie up the radio communications trying to get FARs is not a real positive thing for us to do. In fact, what we want to do is we want everybody to be quiet, and if you know where your crew is, if you have all 4 of your firefighters, then don't tell us that. We don't want to know that. We want to know who's missing, not who's there. And then the last one was a span of control. You know, a normal span of control in your office place and mine is a 5-to-1 or a 4-to-1. They teach us that in management. But as we were beginning the rescue process and throughout the rescue process, the incident commander was sending units over to the rescue area. We have 3 chief officers at that rescue area who is managing the span of control there. So we felt like we had a pretty adequate span of control. So I know I went through those really fast.
Chief, is that span and control?
Span of control.
Span of control.
Thank you for stopping. Thank you for stopping. You know, and we can answer any questions you have about all that. And when you get online, let us know what else you need from us, and we'll help you through that, because there's a lot of technical information here. But I guess the important thing for you all to know is that the state's investigation matches up with the recovery process that we went through. And for me as a fire chief, there's a couple of things that I'm most concerned with. I'm most concerned that our firefighters were in the right place doing the right time when this catastrophic collapse occurred. We know that's the case. We now know that the fire didn't actually start at 12 o'clock when it was called in. The fire actually started at 9 o'clock, and through a bunch of investigation, many investigative hours, we finally got to the point where we understood that people had smelled smoke in the structure starting at 9 o'clock that morning. So we think that that fire may have smoldered up in that attic and impacted that attic space and the components to the attic for quite a while prior to us arriving. One of the lessons for us is that when we arrive on the scene as firefighters, we need to understand that that may not have been when that actual fire occurred. It may have started an hour earlier, 2 hours earlier, in this case 3 hours earlier. So we need to learn from that, and we will. We're going to move forward as an organization. The mayor has been supportive with training. She's going to help us by utilizing some of the funds that we have in the Houston Fire Department to really conduct some training. I've actually asked with me here today, if you have any technical questions, I have Chief Mann, who's our operations executive assistant chief, and I also have our union president, Labor 341 president, Alvin White, who may want to talk a little bit about training. I know that that's one of his areas that he is most passionate about. But before we get to that point, let me just kind of summarize here by saying that May 31st, 2013 was the most tragic day in the history of the Houston Fire Department. We all realize that. We lost 3 of our brothers, 1 of our sisters, and 2 other members are off and still healing. As a fire chief, people ask me, what would you do different? What would you do different to not have such a negative outcome? And my answer is I would do everything different. I'd do everything in my power to not lose a firefighter. But that's hindsight. And I've learned over the last year that hindsight is a bias. And what happens is when you have an event that has a serious negative outcome, the first thing we do as people, it's pretty common for us, is to assume that there are some negative decisions that were made on the front end. We do that. This is a case where we had a negative outcome and no negative decisions were made on the front end. Conversely, many times we go to incidents, and I know you're driving your car and maybe you accidentally run through a red light where there were some negative decisions that were made, but you had a positive outcome. So just because we have a positive outcome on an incident doesn't necessarily mean that everything went right on the front end. So what we've been doing for the last few years is we're looking at every incident. We do what's called an after-action report on every incident. We gather crews together. We talk about the incident, whether it had a good or a bad outcome, and we learn from that incident. And then we share that as best practices and standards with the rest of our organization. The American Fire Service is going to learn from what we suffered through here with the Houston Fire Department. They're going to take our experiences and they're going to learn from it. So if you have any questions for me, maybe we can just hold them and I'll have Alvin White come up. Maybe he'll be able to kind of answer a little bit more about how we're going to move forward with the training. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I guess the best way to honor Captain Nod and EOBB, Firefighter Sullivan, Warner, Captain Bill Dowling, and Yarborough, Firefighter Yarborough and Livesay, is that we learn from this incident. And the only way to learn is to take the report that we have, break it down, and then adjust to the tactics and mistakes that we may have made. The best part here is there were no mistakes made by our officers. That's the one message that needs to be carried out, is that our officers did the right thing that day. They did the risk-benefit analysis, and almost in every report you'll read from the Fire Marshal's office, you'll see that there's mistakes made. In this case, there were no mistakes by those officers, and so we're going to take that and we're going to learn from it. We're also going to get some training that's been that we've been asking for a long time. There's going to be an F-STAR program that the department will start next month in November, which will train our officers and chiefs on tactics and the new tactics that are being taught out there. We're going to have a blue card certification that will be for our incident commanders that the department is going to start. And then the one we're really excited about is the IAFF survival training that will help our members survive maydays. This is a big thing for us, and we are going to have that funding. At least the chiefs assured us that the mayor is going to give us that funding for these classes. And so we hope as our members learn from these mistakes and they take these classes that this won't happen again. This is a dangerous job. Every day firefighters die somewhere in the United States doing this job. So to honor those, you have to learn and you have to move on, and you have to remember that where we came from and where we're going as a department. So the organization is pleased with the report. Our members served on the recovery team. The state did their investigation, and so we are happy with the findings. We do have radio communication issues that we've addressed. You know that the union has been very vocal about our radio issues, and we are working with the administration to resolve those issues on the radio. So thank you for coming out.
I'd like to ask a question about the radios, because I noticed that before the fire, a few weeks before, the union had put out a letter to the chief saying that they were having reports in the field of problems, continuous problems with the new digital radio that had just been converted from the old analog. And my question is, I mean, that was a pretty significant expenditure of money by the city of Houston. Why wasn't that addressed back at the time that the union was? The union says you never even got back to him on that.
Yeah, so the radio issue has been an ongoing issue for us, but it's important to note that the system we had in place failed. In fact, we were ready to move to the new digital system a few months prior to when we had to. We actually moved to it. A day after we moved to it, we realized that the system wasn't ready and we needed to put some more repeaters and harden up buildings and get better coverage in our city. So I immediately pulled the system back out. We went back to the old system, which we were told was just barely holding together. Yeah, well, it just was barely holding together, and just a short while later, it failed about 2 o'clock in the morning. The city IT folks were very responsive to that. They were able to get us in the new digital system, which is a very short period of time, just within a few hours, without even dropping one call. So we moved into the new system. The new system is the only system we have. Now we need to learn how to work within the system we have. I did receive some communications from the union president. Previous union president. And we had a communication about that. I didn't respond in writing. But we all knew that the radio system we were moving to, just like any new system, had a lot of bugs to work out. I'm as concerned about firefighter safety as that last union president, as the current union president. So I certainly wasn't trying to push it under the rug. We were working with the system. In fact, we had a union member who participated on our committee regarding moving into the new system. So I think we were on the same page then. It came out like we weren't, but we were. And I think this is actually demonstrates that labor and management, when you want to move an organization together, you need to do that through strong labor management relations. I need to get input from the people doing the work. And I think that as I gather input through the command team and through the formal processes of the organization, we match that up with the informal processes and some of the formal processes of the union. You will gather better information. Better information leads to better decision making.
Chief, your report, the preliminary report that was issued a few weeks ago, there was a whole laundry list of equipment issues. They were talking about everything from the size of the buttons on the radios made it hard to manipulate with a firefighter glove, to gloves, to the priority channels. It just seemed like there's a whole lot of stuff that the firefighter on the field in an emergency situation was having to deal with.
You're right. So all those issues are being resolved. And that's the key. You got to get the radio in your hand. And because we had to move to this new system, we had to get the radio in our hand and start understanding how we can improve the radio system. And a lot of the improvements through Motorola are as a result of what we've done in Houston. And so I'm just looking at Chief Mann in case he had some specifics. But we've made a half a dozen major changes both to the equipment itself, the radio process, and now we're going to work on the radio training for our members. And our members understand that that's radio communication is very critical, radio discipline, there's a lot to that. So it's not just, here's the other thing too, it's important to remember. This was not a bad decision on the fire ground, we said that. But if it was a bad decision, no piece of equipment is going to outperform a bad command decision. This was an excellent command decision. We were surprised. But no piece of equipment can outperform a bad command decision or position. Questions?
Just a couple.
Yes.
To clarify, when did the new radio system go online?
What was the date?
April 26th, I believe it was.
April 26, 2006.
26, 28.
Say it again.
20,
It was at the end of April. I believe it was the 26th of April, 2013.
about
Roughly a month before.
about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Do you feel like it's fully 100% operational, trustworthy as of today?
No, I think we can always improve our radio system. I think that there's still some areas in the city that we need to get better coverage in. I still think there's some parts to the actual radio itself that we're going to continue to improve. We're working on a lapel mic so our members can talk to each other. We have a new mask coming in the next year or so, and we're going to work on that. So we're looking at the equipment, we're looking at the system, we're looking at the coverage, and I think we can always improve that. And the thing about the entire system, and I think why the union was pretty adamant about it, is the entire country is being relegated to the new system. The entire American Fire Service is moving into this new system. So we're all learning the system as we go. But I'll tell you, the new system is better than the old system in many ways. Now we know exactly, on this fire, we were able to track exactly who was keying the mic at exactly what time they were keying the mic. So we have a better support system for the radios now. And I think that's going to pay off in the long run.
And, like, what part of Houston still needs more coverage? I mean, if we were out there today, is there any specific parts where you
Don't have to cheat me. So that's a good question.
A couple things regarding the radio system. First, you talked about the letter that was sent. That letter is actually kind of a standardized letter from the International Association of Firefighters concerning not our system, but digital systems in general. And a lot of the points that are in that letter, our system was kind of above and beyond some of the issues. There have been problems with digital systems and the transition, and nobody knows that better than TV, the transition to digital. But our system is the most robust digital system for public service in the country right now. As far as the coverage issues, Initially, when we had to transition to this system, there were some areas, particularly places like the tunnels downtown, the medical center, Galleria. We still had some areas that did not have adequate in-building coverage. They had been identified through coverage testing prior to switching over, and our intent, of course, was to delay the transition to that system until those issues had been resolved. Unfortunately, the old UHF system finally gave up the ghost, and we had no choice but to transition. However, those coverage issues have been addressed in those identified buildings. As far as radios, it's kind of two-pronged. There's the hardware and the software. Some of the issues that you brought up as far as buttons and things like that, that's the hardware issues of the radio. And Motorola and all vendors actually are going to continue to work to try and make a more ergonomically friendly radio for firefighters, you know. But just making a radio, and there is a new radio out since we purchased these radios at the transition. There is actually a new ruggedized radio that's out now, the hardware, and it has bigger buttons and a bigger display. But just making bigger buttons and bigger display doesn't necessarily make a bigger radio or a better radio. So there's still some improvements even along those lines that we're working with to try and enhance those radios. We do have a new software release that just is being tested right now. We just received it the 1st of October. We are testing the new software release that will address some of the concerns that we have found since May 31st fire. We began working with Motorola and the Houston Radio Communications Service Division began working with Motorola immediately following this incident and identified the problem areas. Specifically, we were able to break it down into about 6 specific problem areas, and we've been continually addressing those areas. The new software release will finally finish out that list of 6 that we had. Again, we're testing that with a few small core group of radios right now. And if that's successful, we want to make sure that it didn't create any additional problems that we weren't anticipating. And once that beta testing is done within our department, we will upgrade all our radios in the department with the new software release.
What is the training specifically? I mean, has the Chief, you said the mayor, or I think the union guy said it, but Chief, did you talk to the mayor about new training and how much money they're going to add and what is it?
So before we leave the radio system, it's important because the radio is an important piece. But I really need your help here today that when we leave this room, everybody understands that the radios didn't cause the death of our firefighters. That's really important. We identified the radios and the communication issues as part of the problem after the collapse. So just so you can help me through that, because I would hate that we met with the families this morning. And we've been transparent throughout this whole process, and that's what I want to do. And I would hate for the families to sit at home, watch the news tonight, and think that the radio has caused the death of their loved one. That is not the case. So please help me with that.
Did the radio problems exacerbate the rescue effort by not being able?
Sure. Yeah. When you have a lot of people talking on a new radio system and the system, see what happened with the old system is it's different from a telephone. Is that on a telephone you can talk and I can interrupt you. My wife says I do that all the time, right? But on a radio, only one person controls that radio. The old system, when somebody else controlled the radio and you keyed it to say something, you could tell by the sound that somebody else was on the radio, and then you would wait. The new system, there were some issues with that where you were trying to talk and you didn't know if somebody was on the radio. Am I saying that correctly? Yeah, so you're getting bonked. So.
How did that affect the recovery on that day?
Well, what we found, and Chief Mann was there, and our rescue group is, and this is the way fire grounds are set up. So you have the incident commander, and he talks to the people who are assigned the division chiefs in the field, in the positions, and he talks to them on radio. The actual rescue that's taking place is face-to-face communication. So Chief Mann is directing companies, the other two, the rescue chief and the sector chief, or excuse me, the division chief, they're talking face-to-face. So we think the radio system had issues for all of that, but we feel like what was taking place at the rescue was a very calculated face-to-face communications on how we're going to get our members out.
Yeah, the training?
Yeah, so the training, so just so you know, that at 1 o'clock today, because we wanted to make sure that we talked to the family first, then we wanted to bring you all in because before the release of the report at 4 o'clock. But at 1 o'clock today, I sent a memo to the city council the mayor, the staff, the department directors, and a separate memo to our members about the release of the report. And in this memo, it refers to the training, and I'm glad you asked that, so thank you very much. So we're looking at 3 primary training areas, and our focus really is, if you look at firefighter training, is if we have 100% of our training budget, we would like to spend about 75% of our budget and 75% of our time on training on how to stay out of trouble, how to make really good risk decisions, how to communicate better, how to do those kind of things that keep us out of trouble, and then spend about 25% of our time on, if you get in trouble, how do you get out? So we've identified through best practices and best standards, and I can give you all a copy of this that I sent out today, so you'll have the specifics on it if you'd like to. And there's 3 training programs. The first training program is, the union president referred to, is F-STAR, and it stands for Firefighter Safety Through Advanced Technology. This training has been sponsored by UL, Underwriters Laboratory, and NIOSH. I've got a lot of acronyms, and in this document you can look and you can see what all the acronyms mean, but it's supported by the International Association of Fire Chiefs, the International Association of Firefighters. And what it does is we're getting smarter about the way fire moves through buildings, and we're adjusting our firefighting tactics. The American Fire Service is just now being introduced to this F-STAR. The Houston Fire Department is on the leading edge for this type of training. We actually have the people that do the tests and the scientists coming out here, and they're going to give us an overview and a train-the-trainer session next month, within the next couple of weeks. The next piece of training is called Blue Card Certification Program, and it's also been adopted by the I-Chiefs and the firefighters. And it's a training program. It's the only one like it in the country. It's used throughout the United States and many places across the world, like Australia and New Zealand. And it's the only certifying program where you can take an incident commander, you run him through some online courses, you take him down and you put him in a simulation lab. You put them in a simulation lab, and they actually become certified. So they run all the types of calls that they would have as an incident commander, including a mayday. And we would like to say the first time you run that mayday, it should not be on a fire ground. It should be in a simulator. Just like pilots work in simulators, we want our firefighters to work in simulators. And it's a certifying program. And we would tell you that across the history of the American Fire Service, you got to have a license to cut hair, but you don't have to have a license to send people in to fight, to command fires. It's incredible. So we now have a program that we're going to use as a certifying program. And then the last one that Alvin mentioned was a fire ground survival program. This is a very intensive program on how to stay out of trouble and how to get out of trouble once you're in trouble. And that's sponsored by the International Association of Firefighters. And we have this training moving forward pretty soon. So they're expensive programs if you just look at the dollar amount, but if you think about the number one and most important resource we have is our people, and we need to invest in our people and keep them safe, they're not expensive at all. So we have right now, we have the mayor, we're looking at about $1.5 million to initiate the 3 programs and to move forward with train-to-trainer pieces. Now the programs are going to take over a year to get through, but we want to start. We're going to use a train-to-trainer program. We're going to do whatever we can on duty to not cost overtime for the city. And we are actually applying for assistance to firefighter grants in the process, so we're trying to find money outside. We're trying to be creative. But we know that when you have money problems, when you have budget problems in any organization, the first thing they cut out is training. The mayor has been supportive and said that she will not do that. She'll support us with this training.
Just a couple of questions, if I may.
Yes.
So, are these programs, will all Houston firefighters go through some form of this new training program?
Yes, and that's a great question.
And did you say 75% of the budget, you mean the training budget?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The training budget.
And the other, is this new to the state fire marshal's findings, or and I'm not aware, I apologize, did your findings also say that the fire started about 9 a.m., there were reports of smoke as early as 9 a.m.?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank
But that was after hours and hours of investigation.
Chief, on that first finding that the report had no fire, pre-fire planning on the structure, is that something that's done when you arrive at the scene? Or?
No, so thank you for following that, because if I'm not clear on anything, I'd like to explain. So a pre-fire plan, what happens is, when we're out and we go to the EMS calls and we're walking around or we're out in the public, I would like our members to go inside the structure and just visualize and say, if we have a fire in this building, how would we get water? How many people are here? How would we get the people out? What are the components to the structure that could kill us or hurt us? What are going to be the challenges in this structure to get everybody out, life safety, and maybe putting the fire out? That's a pre-fire plan. So what has happened in the past, and most departments are like this, is we do those, we put them on a print form, we put them in the back of the chief's car, and then they sit back there until you have a fire one day, and then you try to figure out where that's at. Well, we've invested in some technology called the digital sandbox, where we can actually go out, and our companies will do this. Our companies will go out, they'll do a walkthrough, they'll enter information into the software, and then when that incident commander arrives on the scene, he punches in the address, and it gives him a diagram of the structure, all the inherent dangers of the structure, the construction type, the number of people, so it gives pertinent information. That information, if you can imagine, when Engine 51 left the station, it was actually a very fast response. They were there at that structure in 3 minutes. This information it doesn't really pay off for the first arriving companies, but when I get there as a battalion chief or one of our company officers get there, they use this information as they move the fire forward. It's very good information.
And on the second finding about you didn't perform a 360 size up.
Yeah.
That was where I guess would you have tried to go around the structure to size it up, see what it was like?
Yeah. So that's what if we get a typical house fire or even a small building, we'll do a 360 because especially with our new F-STAR training, we're going to watch how that fire is moving through that structure. We may see something on the backside that really helps us to fight that fire in a safer way and maybe make sure the occupants survive. So, but what our members did on this structure is they got every side they can see. They saw all 3 sides, but they couldn't see the backside. And the backside may have told them something. In this case, I'm not sure it would have, but that's what the recommendation from the state is. Do whenever possible is what it states. Do a 360.
And that wasn't because of I guess what was the reason behind why that you weren't able to see the backside?
It was just too large of a structure. And you know, the other thing is when you do that 360, the incident commander, he or she's making very fast decisions. And when we think about the incident commander, we think of somebody who's a lone ranger. They're making decisions. And they don't get to go ask somebody else, what do you think? They have to make a decision. They got to make it with limited information, only what they see and what they know. They got to make it in a compressed time frame because things are happening, and when they make a decision, it could be lethal. It's life or death situations. So if they do a 360 on a very large structure, that takes time. That's part of that decision model. Am I going to go in and try to save citizens, or am I going to take the time to do a 360 around this large structure?
Chief, was there an issue with the thermal? I seem to remember something about the temperature in the ceiling that was recorded at the time at the initial.
Yeah,
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Thank you for remembering that. So our members did. This also demonstrates that the first arriving company did exactly what they were supposed to do, because as they entered the structure, they got it's called a TIC. It's a thermal imaging camera, and they pointed it at the ceiling and they identified that there's a fire in that ceiling. So what the TIC does is it tells you there's heat behind that structure, but it doesn't tell you how hot. We've asked our incident commanders over the years is to give us a TIC reading. This TIC reading was 84 degrees Fahrenheit. So they knew that something was hot in that structure. So they did exactly what they should have done. They pulled ceiling, they entered water into that attic space to knock the fire down. So that's why you use the TIC. The TIC was originally, many years ago, we thought as we went in, we could use it to find people inside buildings because it has surface temperatures. But over the years, we found that it's really helps us identify where the fire is. So
Chief,
we're using it better.
I guess in the end, could there have been anything y'all could have done, whether equipment or a procedure to identify, you know, the problem with the roof, and because that the collapse that's what led to the death? Was there anything y'all could have done?
The best thing that could have happened was, and I'd ask people, if you smell smoke, call the fire department. The best thing that our members could have done is got there about 2.5 hours earlier, smelled the smoke, went up in the attic, and we do it 20, 30, 40 times a day. We find a small fire, we put the fire out, and we go home. That would have been something that we could have done that would have probably saved our members' lives. Questions? Thank you very much.
So I can add, any of these people who smelled the smoke say why they didn't call?
You know, they didn't, but I think what happens is that's kind of human nature, somebody else will call. And we ask people, especially in your own home, because you can imagine sitting at home smelling smoke and then finding out that you had a fire that may have hurt your family members. So we're encouraging people to call the fire department. The worst thing that could happen for the fire department is if you don't call us. If you need us for a heart attack or a medical emergency or a fire, and you don't call us for it.
And I apologize, you had mentioned on your list of 8 issues, the last one, the span of control.
Span, so.
I don't really understand that.
Okay, so I'll explain it. So if a captain, a fire captain on an engine company, he or she manages 3 people. That's a 1 to 3 span of control. So when we start dividing, just like an organizational chart, so when we put a fire together, we manage it like an organizational chart. So you have the incident commander, and under the incident commander, you'd like to have 3 or 4 different areas. And then in each one of those areas, you'd like to have 3 or 4 different engine companies. So you just break down the work groups and the manageable work groups.
Okay.
So,
Like a work tree.
yeah, exactly. So in closing, I'd like to remind all news outlets that the findings were presented to the family of our fallen earlier today. You guys have been great with the families. I couldn't say enough. We talked to them today. We asked them if they had any concerns about the media. They said, no, you guys have been awesome. We thank you for working with us on that. They did ask that if you could give them a few days, respectfully. They just got this document today, the bound document. We worked through with it this morning. Chief Man did an excellent job, but I think that they need to spend some more time with this. Of course, you know, all those feelings are there for them again. So just give them a few days before you contact them. We would absolutely appreciate it.
Was there any immediate reaction? I mean, obviously they didn't have a chance to read the whole thing, but in your conversation with them, maybe in looking at a summary page?
You know, I think they were, I think the fact that the fire burned so long before our members got there, and the fact that our members made good decisions on the front end really helped. Because, you know, when you, once it, and I'll say it, is when you have a devastating event, you're looking for somebody to blame. You're looking for who can I blame, what system can I blame? Can I blame the radios? Can I blame the trucks? Can I blame the firefighters? There's nothing to blame for. The blame was that fire started at 9 o'clock in the morning and burned and got ahead of us, and we wanted to, and that was really what killed it. So thank you all very, very much. I appreciate you guys. If you have any technical questions, Chief Manager got